white privilege. I believe in equal opportunity. I feel everyone should have the same privilege my white family had. My four grandparents had the privilege of being first generation here. They felt honored to go to school, though I do not believe any of them graduated. They had to work to help support the family. They all had the privilege of working hard from young kids. Not all their parents spoke the language, but they had the privilege of knowing two languages, Italian and English. People today get paid a lot of money for that. As adults, they had the privilege of working hard in menial jobs, and they were always happy. I remember them singing, playing jokes, laughing, and having fun. They had the privilege of living in Brooklyn. They didn't live in luxury, but they took pride in their homes. They respected their neighborhoods and all people. They had the privilege, as did most of the Italian immigrants, of dealing with prejudice. Yet they never complained. They were too busy working, sometimes 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. They had the privilege, along with immigrants before them and from other nations, to help build the great city they lived in. The things we take for granted today, subways, bridges, historical buildings, roadways. They had the privilege of teaching their children to respect authority, respect others, and respect themselves. Did some immigrants do illegal things? Yes. When they were caught, the cops kicked their butts. If they went to jail, they knew they deserved it. My parents both lived on the same block in Brooklyn. My dad had the privilege of getting up at the crack of dawn and going to work at 10 years old with his eagle on weekends to do manual labor. The lessons he learned served him well. It saved him countless dollars because he could do it all himself in his own house years later. By age 14 or so, we had the privilege of carrying heavy packages and blocks of ice up 3 flights of stairs to earn money. My dad wasn't a bad kid, never arrested. The Irish cops weren't fond of the Italian kids, a well-known fact documented in the history books, and lived by my dad and his friends. They got their butt kicked by the cops. My parents came from decent families, but not everyone in the neighborhood did. Many of their friends came from dysfunctional families, abusive and/or alcoholic parents. The majority of them made good lives. My dad and his friends since their Brooklyn days, 60-plus years of friendship, both with me in the beginnings, both very successful, decent family men by choice. My mom and dad had the privilege of walking to school many blocks in all weather. My mom had the privilege of coming home from school at age 9 and take care of the house before her parents returned from work. My dad had the privilege of getting a job at 18 years old in the Wall Street area. He started pushing carts of cards. He had the privilege of working his butt off, and that was noticed by the older adults in higher positions. He had the privilege of learning life lessons playing competitive games, stickball and other games in the street. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and sometimes it's just not fair. That's called life. My generation and generations before me had the privilege of learning how to deal with situations ourselves, how to fight back when needed, how to compromise. No parents were there to do it all for us. We had the privilege of common sense. If you were hit, you were allowed to defend yourself, and you didn't get into trouble. It shouldn't be called zero tolerance, it should be called zero common sense. When did we become a nation where self-defense is punishable? My dad had the privilege of working hard and being proud of his accomplishments. He wasn't handed a job until he was qualified to do the job. His religion, gender, and skin color weren't taken into consideration. There were no quotas companies had to fill. Sometimes he felt discrimination. It made him work harder. He didn't whine. He didn't have time to march anywhere carrying signs, and he wasn't out screaming in the streets and destroying neighborhoods. He had the privilege of getting up daily at 4 a.m. and not returning home until 6:30 p.m., and that's only when he wasn't working overtime and weekends. He did that so we could have the privilege of living on Long Island in a great community and school district. My parents had the privilege of meeting when Mom was 15 and Dad was 17. They married when Mom was 19 and Dad was 21, and they became parents when Mom was 21 and Dad was 20. When I was young, my parents could have handed us things, but being we had such privilege, they didn't. My dad worked sometimes 7 days a week for a month straight, so it was my privilege and my siblings' privilege to do what Dad was too busy to do. When we moved here, there was no built-in pool, no trees, just a huge piece of land, and we had the privilege of taking turns mowing it. My siblings and I had the privilege of cleaning up after dinner every night and feeding the many pets. We had the privilege of cleaning the house on weekends. Now trust me, Mom had the privilege of working sunup to sundown daily, doing everything it took to run a household. We had the privilege of taking turns. We had the privilege of learning to work as a team and making great business deals at 9 and 12. I've been told that kids should be allowed to be kids. Well, today I hear kids whining, complaining, being disrespectful, being unappreciative, saying they are bored, and they are offended and insulted at everyone and everything. They don't know how to play in groups, and they have no idea how to all get along. They have no imagination, take no responsibility, think jobs are beneath them, and think the world revolves around them. That does not sound like a happy childhood. My parents had all that privilege through the years, and today, at 73 and 75, they still talk about their happy childhood with fond memories, a sparkle in their eye, and laughter. At 12, I had the privilege of walking into the kitchen and Mom telling me she signed me up for a babysitting course. I wasn't asked if I wanted to go, I was going. I started babysitting shortly thereafter, earning my own money, and I have ever since. At 16, I had the privilege of getting my first job as a waitress, and in the summers, I had the privilege of working in New York City for my dad's company, the same company he started pushing carts for when he was 18. Sisters had the same privilege as I did. They all babysat from age 12. My one sister set her alarm daily all summer long for a babysitting job early in the morning, which lasted all week. I had the privilege of being taught to never care what anyone else thinks, and it has served me well through life. I had the privilege of being spanked on occasion, being punished, being spoken to sternly, and being told it was my fault. Not the teacher's fault, the neighbor's fault, the color of my skin, the color of my eyes, the dog's fault. It was my fault, and I learned from it. I had the privilege of growing up in a home that was like the United Nations and still is. Everyone is welcome unless they give us a reason not to welcome them. Everyone is treated as an individual. If I don't like you, it has nothing to do with your gender, your ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, race, political beliefs, color of your shirt, shoe size, or your cat's name. If I don't like you, it's because I don't like who you are. My siblings and I gave our kids the very same privileges my family has always had. By age 14, both my children worked at McDonald's. Sadly, today, it's not the norm for kids to be told to get jobs. When I was young, we were expected to work and keep up our grades, and we did. My niece chose medical school, and my children also went to college. They all had the privilege of school loans, working while going to school, missing family events to study, and skipping vacations for school responsibility. I had the privilege of going back to school in my 30s while working full-time and being a single mother. I made excellent grades and was always there for my kids. I had the privilege of very little sleep. I also don't want to hear, "You can't do it." All that privilege has paid off. You actually become successful. You earn the right then to be told how spoiled you are because you had it all, bringing you right back to never care what anyone else thinks. Kids today don't have the privilege of facing the consequences, of being afraid the teacher will call their parents, of being afraid a cop will bring them home for doing something dangerous or stupid. Kids today don't have the privilege of losing the game, even though they tried their hardest, of being told no to something, and of realizing there's a big world out there and it doesn't revolve around them. No, we were not perfect kids. Privilege doesn't make you perfect. We were well-behaved, respectful, law-abiding kids, though. And that was directly because of all the privilege we had. We were so busy being privileged, we didn't have time to get into trouble. If you want all this white privilege, it's yours for the taking. I say go for it. The only thing standing in your way is you. I believe in equal opportunity. I feel everyone should have the same privilege my white family had. It's so very sad that not everyone takes advantage of all that privilege like my family did.